This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
So Jesus breaks it down into 4 simple statements. And that's what the rest of this passage that we're looking at today is what Jesus says to him in a very simple way. He says, look, I want you to understand 4 things. First of all, he says, you have to be born physically and spiritually to enter the kingdom of God. He basically repeats what he says. You're not going to see the kingdom of God unless you're born again. Then he says, look, what I'm saying is you're not going to see the kingdom of God unless you're born physically and spiritually. And he explains it that way. Jesus says, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he can't enter the kingdom of God. Born of water means born physically. And so the first thing that Jesus says is, look, here's what I'm saying to you. You have to be born physically, of course, obviously. But you also have to be born spiritually if you're going to enter into the kingdom of God. Now, for the Greeks, this was a philosophy. This was a point of philosophy for them. Because the Greeks believed that every person was a 3-parter. You had your body, physical, you had your soul, which was the mind, will, and emotions, and there was the spirit. And so for Christians, Greeks embraced this a whole lot easier than Jews embraced it. Because they understood this concept. It was the way that they philosophized. They said, yes, you are physical, and yes, you have a soul, a mind, will, and emotions. And so this idea that you have to be born spiritually was acceptable because they understood it, that you were incomplete unless you were born spiritually. And so there was this idea that was presented to the early Christians that was embraced by the Greeks, but the Jews really struggled with this because they thought that you achieved this kingdom of God by all of your good works and doing all of these things that you had been trained to do all of your life. Now, what Jesus was doing with Nicodemus was he was saying to him, Nicodemus, I want you to understand something. In spite of how good you are, because there was no question that these were good people. I mean, they were just a little nuts. They took it a little too far. But in spite of how good you are, you're not good enough. In spite of how good you are, you have not been born again. You have not been born from above. Because that's what really has to happen. Now, what Jesus was saying was that those who are not born spiritually cannot enjoy the kingdom. What he was saying to Nicodemus was, Nicodemus, I don't care how hard you try, I don't care how good you are, you're not going to see the kingdom of God. Because it's not about all of those things, it's about whether or not you're born spiritually. So yes, you have to be born physically, you have to be born, but you also have to be born spiritually. That's why the world has so much trouble with this truth. They just simply can't relate. They don't understand. What is this? What does that mean? How do I get born spiritually? What does that mean? Do I have to have some sort of weird, go through some sort of chant and I pass out, and when I wake up I'm a different person? What has to happen? And believe me, there are whole cults and groups of people that conjure up these sort of things and send you through these experiences that are just dangerous. And there are people who think that if they have some sort of mind-blowing experience, that somehow or other equates with salvation, and so they're now prepared for heaven. If they starve themselves into oblivion and they have this experience, then suddenly they're holy. We're going to see in just a few moments how wrong the world is in that area, and as wrong Christians are too.